So let's talk about those federal regulations. In general, you can say that it's regulations on worker safety and the environment that are the most relevant and prevalent for the E&P industry. Let's talk first about safety. And it's interesting to me that a lot of the laws that drive these issues all came out of the Nixon administration in the early 1970s. So the first is the Occupational Safety and Health Act, which created OSHA, and they are the big bad dudes when it comes to enforcing workplace safety. They can levy large fines, so they do potentially swing a big stick, and most companies tremble when the idea of an OSHA investigation is mentioned. Just out of curiosity, you could say, any idea how many people die annually working in the oil and gas industry? I don't know whether this is going to strike you as a big or a small number, but it's between 100 and 150. 2014, with all the drilling activity, was a big year with 144. 2015, it was only 98. So the numbers go up and down. A lot of the mishaps, though, are road mishaps. In other words, they're vehicular accidents that kill people. It's not like you might think of fires, explosions, heavy equipment being dropped on them. I mean, those things happen, but a lot of it's traffic accidents. So I've got this really great link of a safety incident I would like you to watch. And I want you to watch it for two reasons. First of all, I want you to realize that some of the risk that comes in this industry comes from the fact that you're dealing with volatile chemicals. And second, what can seem like a fairly mundane, easy job in the oil and gas industry can turn quite deadly. And so I encourage you to watch the video and just get this story behind you as a learning point. Welcome back, and I do hope you watched that video. What I wanted you to think about, though, is beyond the moral and legal imperatives, it really is good business to pay attention to worker safety, because you don't want to pay higher workers' compensation insurance premiums. You don't want to have to pay to settle claims. You don't want your job site to be shut down. And frankly, you want to be able to hire the best people, and the best people don't work in unsafe places. So there's a lot of reasons why safety should be important to you as an operator, but it's difficult because there's going to be times where it seems like safety is contrary to effective productions. Just like in the video I had you watch on the incident, why didn't they do the right things? Because they were trying to get the job done, or what they thought was going to be the best way to get the job done. Next up is the environment. Lots of relevant issues currently going on with the environment. And if you want to go back and say what perhaps was the biggest implication of Donald Trump's election as president as opposed to Hillary Clinton, it's going to be in the next couple of slides in terms of the oil and gas industry, because these are some major issues that are changing under the Trump administration. So Clean Water Act of 1972, again, that rule out of the 1970s, that spawned all of the opportunity to regulate the water. What became a very hot topic during the Obama administration was this term, waters of the U.S. And basically what they did is they expanded the definition of what constitutes waters, and that was going to vastly increase the amount of permitting and the ability of the federal government to regulate activities surrounding lots of things, not just E&P operations, but certainly E&P operations. Many parties took this to court. The Sixth Circuit Court stayed it, and then in October, so depending on when you're watching this video, just a few weeks ago, the Trump administration issued a formal guidance to the EPA to review and either rescind or revise the definition that was expanded under the waters of the U.S. Likewise, the Clean Water Act of 1974. And so again, this gives the EPA the opportunity to look into protecting the water supply. During the second term of the Obama administration, the EPA launched in a major study of the impact of fracking on the water supply. It was released, I have on the slide 2017, it was actually released like in December 2016. This generated a lot of controversy, to be blunt, because it didn't turn out like the environmentalists wanted it to turn out when they issued the draft report. There was a lot of angst and a lot of rewriting that went on. So now the report reads more about here are all the ways fracking could influence the water supply, and they're all true. What they stripped out of the final report was a statement in the draft that said, even though all these things could happen, we only see isolated incidents of them happening, and we don't see a system-wide risk of fracking to drinking water. Not exactly what the EPA wanted to say, and so they backtracked on that pretty significantly. But again, with the new Trump administration, less of an issue here. Clean Air Act of 1970, again, you can see all these rules, Nixon administration time frame. And so this makes sense. It's the clean air. How this pertains to the E&P operations is, first of all, in the idea of emissions from the E&P operations and also from the pipeline operations, because there is some leakage from the pipelines. So the EPA issued guidance during the second term of the Obama administration to reduce methane and VOC emissions by 95%. And obviously the E&P industry's pushed back very hard on this because such a high standard was going to require a lot of monitoring equipment and a lot of expense. And so currently what's happening is the rule was passed. The Trump administration is on record as saying we're not going to enforce it on public lands. They've been told they have to enforce it, and so right now the EPA is saying we're considering a revision to this. Not much happening, but could happen. And again, what would happen is it would require operators to spend a lot more money on the well sites with equipment to both capture and to monitor these sorts of emissions, which is going to drive up costs. The Clean Power Plan was another initiative of the Obama administration, which again, the Trump administration is rolling back. You can see the facts on it on the screen. Here's the interesting thing. Is this good news or bad news for the E&P industry? You can make a case that it's good news because what the Clean Power Plan did was going to make it virtually impossible to ever build another coal power plant. And it was going to, in theory, give states a lot of latitude to begin switching to even more natural gas. In reality, the beef that the E&P industry had with it is in the counting rules, states got a lot more credit for leaning on renewables as opposed to switching to natural gas. So right now, the natural gas industry is probably in a very good shape with the suspension of the Clean Power Plan. Economics are pushing companies to do the natural gas conversions, or I should say, are pushing utilities to switch to more natural gas utility plants. Coal consumption is declining. Coal generation is declining. They are not building new coal plants. But right now, there isn't this, what the E&P industry would argue, are tilted counting rules in favor of renewables. So these 4 years, at least of the Trump administration, give the natural gas industry that much more time to penetrate the electrical generation market. Lastly, on the wildlife, this is some interesting stuff because you have, for example, the Endangered Species Act of '93. And what's interesting is you can be guilty of a taking even if you reduce their habitat. So they've had situations where companies have wanted to do drilling operations, but run into problems with where they want to clear off the pad. That's considered a taking of the habitat. And then you have the Migratory Bird Act of not the Nixon administration. I guess that would be the Woodrow Wilson administration in 1918. And so what this says is that you can't create hazards for birds. In the E&P industry, what it practically means is you have to cover all the tanks so that they don't get mired in the oil. A lot of people want to talk about wind farms. Let me tell you, data is just straight up the middle data is very hard to get on the impact of wind farms. You have a lot of anecdotes on both sides, good and bad, but straight up data is a little bit hard to find. What I'm reading is the newer style wind turbines where the blades spin more slowly pose a lot less of a hazard to birds. So we'll see. It's almost reflexive that businesses knee-jerk is opposing any new regulation. And the reason for that is obvious. It drives up your cost to comply. What typically, so you see this tension of back and forth. And I think what often happens is they do find an acceptable middle ground where significant progress is made on these environmental safety issues and the costs are reasonable for the business. At the end of the day, it just works out for the better. Obviously, the E&P industry felt like the Clean Power Plan, the waters of the U.S., and the methane emissions were really going to hurt them, and they could well be right. But it's only natural. You should never expect that any business is going to stand up and jump up and down and say, I'm in favor of more regulation. You have to just take a balanced view and count the costs, see what the benefits are, and hopefully things will come out in the middle. Are the two different businesses equally affected? It depends. For example, on the methane rule, what this could really limit is the ability to flare natural gas on site. That would be difficult, like we talked about, if there are no pipelines, no gathering lines to capture that gas. So I think the answer is they're different. They can be differentially affected, but it's very hard to know which is going to come out worse. So just to wrap it up, state law primarily governs E&P operations. Federal law operates at the higher environmental worker safety levels, although they sometimes intrude into the E&P operations as well. Like I said, not the sexiest topic imaginable, but one that you've got to be aware of if you're going to be effective.